Hello everyone and welcome to Community Spotlight exclusively here on RCN. Glad you could join us tonight. You know, so much has been talked about how we can help the environment, make the earth last longer. A great way to do that is to find alternative means of transportation whenever possible. We're talking about shoe leather here. We're talking about bicycle tires, and here to take us through that are some great representatives from Coalition for Alternative Transportation. They're located right here in the Lehigh Valley. You've probably seen them out and about on their bikes or at some of the bigger festivals in the area with their bike lockup positions there, so you can enjoy a good time while making sure that your cycles are well taken care of. Joining us for our first segment, we're very happy to have on board here the CAT Board of Directors member and neuroscientist for Lehigh University in the biology department, Jennifer Swann. Professor Swann, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you. And also joining us, the director for Coalition of Appropriate Transportation, Scott Slingerland. And Scott, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Hi, Dan. Thank you.
And your credentials, I also see there are some letters after your name. Tell us a little bit about them.
I spent some time, about 12 years, working as an engineer, working on power plant emission control, and have transferred my life from power generation to power consumption and how we move around our communities.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what, let's start off by building the frame of what CAT, Coalition for Alternative Transportation, is all about.
Thanks, Dan. To give you a little bit of an idea, CAT supports walking, biking, trails, and transit, such as Lanta Bus in our Lehigh Valley region. CAT has been active for about 20 years, and to give you an idea of the groups of people that we serve maybe number one, people who can't afford cars for transportation, who as a necessity they walk or bike or ride the bus to work, for shopping. So we want to support people who need car-free transportation, but the other kind of person that we serve is somebody who maybe has a 20-30 mile commute each day. They spend about an hour in the car driving to work and back, and when they get home from work they want to get outside and they want to walk in the neighborhood, or they want to go for a bike ride, or maybe on the weekends they want to go down to the towpath to explore a local rail trail, and they want to really get the experience of being going from one place to another as an adventure and as an experience.
Excellent.
So with CAT we want to support the experience through education of people who walk and bike and ride the bus, for people to be as well versed as they can. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would imagine one kind of feeds the other. When people get to become recreational cyclists, maybe they start to consider, it's getting nice out, maybe I can ride my bike to work a couple of days a week. Nice.
Definitely.
Jennifer, I know that there are some great physical benefits to being on a bicycle or walking as opposed to turning the ignition or nowadays hitting the button that says start on the motor vehicles.
Absolutely. There are a couple of societies, the American Heart Association and the American Sports Medicine Association, that a couple of years ago suggested that people need to do more physical exercise. We've all heard about couch potatoes, and we've all heard how bad that is for our health. Biking and walking can really correct those situations very easily, and there are a number of diseases that are affected: osteoporosis, cardiovascular, of course, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. All of those diseases have some factor related to actual exercise. And so the more people can get out and do things, just biking 2 or 3 times a week can really put a dent in some of those diseases. So it's important.
Absolutely.
And it's fun. So that's the other piece of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the recreational value and the health benefits are enormous, no doubt about it. Now, besides promoting a healthy lifestyle, getting out to breathe the fresh air and raising the heart rates a little bit, which is all beneficial, I know that Coalition for Alternative Transportation is involved in so many ways to make sure that people can get out there and do these things. What are some of the projects and programs that you guys have that you're working on?
Well, our big one this spring is bicycle education in elementary schools, which you'll hear about a little bit later. But we also work with local municipal governments, and say, for example, somebody somebody's house is on one side of the street and they have a very short walk either wherever they're going to go, and we want local governments to support, you know, good sidewalks. You'll hear about that later too. But you know, the infrastructure in place. So we have one side is awareness and education, and the other side is infrastructure. So, you know, specifically sidewalks and a walkable community with traffic, you know, reasonable traffic flow that's comfortable for people to walk in their neighborhoods.
And you know, that's a huge point, because I can remember in areas, for instance, where mall development had taken place, maybe more so 10 to 20 years ago. I think the pedestrian was the last person considered. You see a lot of intersections where I remember seeing "don't cross," like "do not be a pedestrian at this intersection" signs, and it's a good thing that we don't see that a whole lot anymore with new construction anyway.
So we want people to see it from that point of view, as well as the health benefits and how it all kind of comes together when you can use your body.
Absolutely.
Transportation.
Agreed. Absolutely.
We're taking a look at some photographs. We saw one of the rail to trails running along the river, which we are really lucky to be living in the Lehigh Valley to have. That is just a treasure. It's used by the Via Marathon in the fall, but it's there for everybody all year round, whether you're walking the dog, taking a bike out for a ride. I mean, I've even had a road bike out on that trail because of the compact nature of the surface. It's just phenomenal for just about everything.
I can't say that CAT has created those trails, but as a nonprofit organization, we support the use of those trails, and in a way that, you know, trail users who walk or ride their bikes or walk their dog, or people who fish on the Delaware and Lehigh Canal, is a great regional trail, but we want people to be courteous to each other and to, you know, communicate.
Absolutely.
And support each other on the trail too.
Jennifer, I know that this is near and dear to your heart. Tell us a little bit about your personal involvement and what interested you with CAT.
Yeah, I got into CAT because I was really interested in seeing that people would use alternative transportation to just walking or riding a car. I personally ride a car. I live in Allentown and I work in Bethlehem, and I ride my car every day. I'd much rather have my bike, but it's a commute that I haven't quite figured out. But when I got involved with CAT, one of the members of the CAT board set up women's biking on Tuesdays. And after just a couple of weeks of doing that, I noticed that my knees got a lot stronger. And it's just from the activity of pedaling a bike, not for more than 30, 40 minutes a day. And when I stopped, when we had bad weather, my knees went back to getting weak again. So it's extremely helpful, and it does not take long to build up that kind of strength.
Right.
And it's a great way to see the neighborhoods. It's really, really fun.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
I can relate to the challenge of finding that commutable bicycling route to get between Allentown and Bethlehem. Things are getting better from what I understand, so that there's always hope there. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk to John Schubert, who will be joining Scott. And Jennifer, thank you for joining us here in the first segment. John is a member of the Pennsylvania Pedestrian Pedal Cycle Advocacy Committee, and we'll get to talk to him a little bit about getting around on 2 feet and otherwise. Stay with us here on Community Spotlight. And you're back with us here on Community Spotlight. Glad you could join us. Coalition for Appropriate Transportation is in the spotlight this evening. I want to thank Jennifer Swann, the professor at Lehigh University, biology department, who's a big part of this organization. And everybody that we're talking to is not just preaching, they're also teaching, and they're out there walking the walk, so to speak, including our next guest, John Schubert.
Hi there.
John Schubert, welcome. He is the bicycling pedestrian advocate and member of the board of directors of Coalition for Appropriate Transportation. And John, along with that, you're a part of the Pennsylvania Pedestrian Pedal Cycle Advisory Committee.
That's correct.
And that's of interest. Maybe if you don't mind telling us a little bit about that.
Well, that's a committee that advises state government on bicycle and pedestrian issues. Occasionally we get PennDOT to do things they wouldn't have done otherwise. Yeah.
And such as?
accommodating bicyclists. We've gotten PennDOT to support some beneficial changes in state law. The passing clearance law, which unfortunately is honored in the breach, was a direct result of a guy named Joe Stafford, who's one of our committee members.
And that's cutting a wide swath in a car around a cyclist or a pedestrian?
Yeah.
If safety allows.
It says cyclist, and safety always does allow.
That's a good point.
Your car has that pedal in the middle. You can always use that and wait until it's safe.
There you go. Absolutely. You're an advocate. You also do what you're talking about here. Tell us a little bit about your walking and why you walk.
Well, like everybody, I get around a lot of different ways. I drive a car. I ride a bike. I used to fly airplanes. And walking is something, A, we all have to do it. B, it can be very enjoyable. My wife and I will chill for a mile or two after dinner on a pleasant evening. When you're visiting a new city, it's a great way to see things. And as Jennifer said earlier, it's health benefits. Getting the legs pumping is very beneficial for a lot of health reasons. And, our American culture needs to accept that. And part of that is just getting out there and doing it. Leave your car parked and walk that extra 200 yards to that other store, that kind of thing. It'll help you. It's nice. It's good for your car because you avoid the cold start in the car and you avoid that little piece of traffic that you're participating in.
Good point.
Yeah.
Now, there are ways, I would imagine, that we can make walking safer. From a PennDOT standpoint, yes, even when things are maybe not ideal, just being smart about things, I would imagine, comes into play.
Yeah. For the pedestrian, I'd say, be aware. Don't be afraid, but be aware. And if you're walking, say, on a road where you have to cross an intersection or in a place where there's a lousy sidewalk or no sidewalk, be aware of what you can expect other people to see and not see. And don't be afraid to signal. Now, should you have to signal? In a perfect world, no, you shouldn't have to signal to anybody. But when I'm out walking, I live in outside of Coopersburg. We have 2-lane roads with no shoulders.
No shoulders.
And sometimes, motorist is coming up. He's forgotten he's not in the freeway anymore. He's in a residential neighborhood. I'll stick my hand out. Hey, buddy, give me some space.
Yeah.
You know what they do? They give me some space.
How about that?
Yeah. When I get to an intersection, I want to be aware. Can that guy see me? Would he be looking for me where I am? Because he can't look in all directions at once.
Right.
So you don't want the motorist, you don't want to be thinking motorist looks in all directions at once. You want to think, where would he be looking from his point of view? If he's entering the intersection that way and going that way, where's he going to look? If I'm over here and about to cross his path, I'm not where he's scanning.
Right.
So being aware, signaling when appropriate.
A situation comes to mind, and that is the car behind a truck that wants to make a turn into the crosswalk that you're using.
Yeah.
Always dangerous. That's something that I think walkers really need to be aware of, for instance.
Agreed, yeah. And if the car driver's blocked his view, that's something to be aware of. If his view isn't blocked, give him a wake-up call.
Something that's out of the usual, they might not expect, but it puts you in focus, I would imagine, as the pedestrian.
Boy, you ought to be doing that.
Yeah, I know we had talked during the break about low visibility situations, and Scott, that's a challenge no matter what form of transportation you're utilizing, be it motorized or non-motorized. But what are some of the situations that bring about low visibility that you guys are concerned about?
I walk on rural roads at night a couple hundred times a year, so I see this a lot. One thing is that pedestrians are amazingly hard to see. You can have a yellow shirt and you're still hard to see. Be aware of that. And the thing is that the car has the headlights. To our brains, which evolved, the car headlights look like eyes to us. So some part of our brain thinks, of course he sees me. It's bright lights and they look like eyes. But no, you blend into the back he's looking here. He's only looking in that little puddle of light, and you're over there.
Right.
So he doesn't notice you. He's looking here. Even with a yellow shirt or something, you're not very visible. So be aware of that. Now, what do you do about that? One thing is be in his face, signal, and then observe his reaction. Then once you observe him react, you know you've been seen. Or get well out of the way so you don't care whether he sees you.
Right.
But if you're on a road shoulder and a motorist comes by, there's a very good chance he won't see you until he's very close.
Right.
And that's biology.
So
Jennifer's bailiwick, you know?
Absolutely. So you got to make yourself visible, and you got to use some common sense out there for sure, John.
It's being aware, and it's more than common sense because it's understanding that human vision is limited.
Right.
What we call foveal vision, which is, you know, the central part of your eye, is the width of 2 thumbs at your arm's length.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
Yeah.
So anything beyond that really depends on how well you scan.
Right. Absolutely. John, thank you for the insight, and appreciate your insight here as bicycling pedestrian advocate and also with Pennsylvania Pedestrian Pedal Cycle Advisory Committee. Thank you again.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, but not a bad organization to be a part of. When we come back, Brian Sherry will be joining us with the League of American Bicyclists. He's also a cycling instructor and another board of directors member with the Coalition for Alternative Transportation. Stay with us. And you're back with us here on Community Spotlight. Glad you could join us. The Coalition for Appropriate Transportation, that's what we're talking about here tonight on Community Spotlight. And joining Scott and myself, we welcome on board Brian Sherry. He is with the League of American Bicyclists, a cycling instructor, and also on the board of directors for Coalition for Appropriate Transportation. Brian, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your role and some of your interests and where your passions are when it comes to appropriate transportation.
I've been pretty much a lifelong cyclist. I've learned about Steve Schmidt and heard about him for many years. He's the gentleman who started this organization 23 years ago. And probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I got a chance to actually be a part of the organization. I live in Allentown and have shortly thereafter become a licensed cycling instructor through the League of American Bicyclists. So we focus on education from children through adults, teaching them how to operate as a vehicle would on the streets.
I see. Excellent. On the streets being a key part of that, especially when you're using a bicycle to commute, I would imagine, as opposed to on the sidewalks. Is that the case?
That's correct. You know, sidewalks are tough and streets are intimidating to a lot of people. The thing about riding on the sidewalk is bikes don't play well with a lot of what is coming on a sidewalk. So you have dogs, you have balls, you have cars backing out of driveways, and quite honestly, it's a very difficult way to enter the traffic stream. So if you operate yourself in the streets as a motor vehicle, it's hard to believe to some, but it is actually much safer than riding a bike on the sidewalk.
Makes sense in a lot of respects. Just the fact that you're moving with vehicles at roughly the same pace, I think, would probably help the safety factor there a little bit. Is that the case?
That is the case. You know, and it basically it's easier to interact with pedestrians. I mean, as CAT, as an organization, part of our focus is also pedestrian safety. So being able to act to a pedestrian as a car would with a bicycle is the reason to operate in traffic that way.
Makes sense, absolutely. I understand that we just saw kids, and of course bike safety, very important for kids. The helmets, crucial. Don't buy a bike unless you're buying a helmet at the same time or already have one that's going to fit right. But also, that's just the point of entry, learning how to ride a bike. There's some more education that might be useful from that point forward.
We have been fortunate enough to have a PennDOT grant for the past 2 years. We're in the second year of our funding for that. Scott knows the numbers for how many children we service through that program.
So this is our second year. Last year we taught about over 5,000 children in the Lehigh Valley.
Wow.
Through this program. We fitted 800 helmets, and at about 20 elementary schools. So the basic structure of our education program, we have recognized for ages 5 to 14.
Mm-hmm.
We recognize the importance or the beneficial use of helmets. We recognize that having mechanically safe bikes for children to have air in their tires and brakes that work, and then the third part is to know how to use your bike. And so
Right.
that's practicing the skills. The last part is learning about traffic flow. So for children who've never had a driver's license, they're in the formative years, for them to understand, which side of the street that traffic moves on and what a stop sign or a red light means.
Excellent.
Can really be the big ways to have a good ride.
Right, absolutely. Those are excellent points. The one thing that comes into mind too is a lot of times parents will make sure their kids are well outfitted with helmets, and they'll ride along with the kids without helmets on themselves. Not a good idea, I take it.
Yeah, the helmets don't always have the cool factor that people are looking for in life. I personally don't look great in a helmet, but that being said, the job of the helmet is to keep your head safe, and all your functions run through your brain, and that's what a helmet sets out to protect, basically.
Absolutely. I love the cool grooves that I end up with in the hair after wearing one.
On the
right?
hair, yeah.
I got to hand it to you guys for coming in and talking about safety for bikes, safety for pedestrians. If you're interested, it's the Coalition for Appropriate Transportation. You can find them at lvcat.org. Thanks, guys, and thank you to our other guests tonight. I'm Dan Mowdy. Thank you for joining us here on Community Spotlight. Good night, everybody.